We bought 40 acres in 1993 and decided it would be a great place to finally build a home and retire.
I am fifth generation. My great-great-grandfather homesteaded here.
Yep, let's go. Let's go. The gate's that way. Let's go. What are you waiting on, Maya? Yep. Sarah, go on. Go on.
We have 300 head of elk that come down out of the high country. They're incredibly beautiful.
I'm a fourth generation rancher. When I was little, Dad would let me have 2 cows out of the herd so I could have my own herd.
One of my favorite things is the red-winged blackbirds. And it's usually, honey, honey, the red-winged blackbirds are back, you know. This has been my favorite place I've ever lived in my life, I must say.
Representatives is on your watch.
People have called and complained to every regulatory
House and
entity
Senate
out
consider
there.
legislation today directing President Bush.
Today's witnesses represent oil companies that paid more than $36 billion in profits.
$120 a barrel. Now is not the time for topping off.
There she is. We call it our new neighbor, neighbor 907.
We are in a split estate situation where we own the surface and someone else owns the mineral rights. And what happens in Colorado, and I think in most western states, is the mineral rights are dominant.
The law on mineral extraction goes back hundreds of years that says the mineral owner has a right to extract that mineral, and to a certain extent can extract it and impact the surface without compensation.
We have 70 acres here, and I can't convince them that they need to drill somewhere besides 200 feet from our house.
The energy policy has been to drill, 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 and drill some more.
They're a very strong industry. They've got a tremendous amount of political influence and an awful lot of money.
As a civil servant, I spoke out, but it's difficult to do so because you feel constantly that you're risking your job or your family's future.
Oh, yeah, it burned.
Yeah, I'd say.
As I sat there and looked out my window into my backyard, all I could think was, there's no way I can stay out of this. I'm sitting here with all of the right resources. These people need help.
This is before any problems, before we lived in Rifle. And then everything changed.
They're motivated by profits, and unfortunately they're motivated by short-term profits. They don't take the long view.
A couple times I said, you come out here and live. You come out here and live in my house for a week. I have no rights.
The Rocky Mountains are seeing an unprecedented boom in oil and gas drilling. Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah. The boom is happening all over the country. There's oil and gas operations in 32 states right now, but the Rocky Mountain states are really seeing the vast majority of the expansion. And it's overflowing into communities where people are seeing this right in their backyards.
I'll show you where they wanted to put this location, one of the first places that they wanted to put it.
They just surprise you and say, we have to put a well out there. You don't have any say in it.
A split estate situation is when somebody who owns the surface of their land does not own the resources that are underneath their land. For example, oil and gas or other minerals. A private person could own a house with land, and the federal government or another private individual might own the resources under it. The person who owns the oil and gas has rights to access that oil and gas, which means that whoever owns the surface probably can't control what happens on their own property.
All of a sudden, I just find new stakes out in the middle of my alfalfa field. I believe this stake represents their outer boundary of their pad. Just guessing it would be about 200 feet from our house, which is awful close.
Because we said, we don't want the smell, and they said, well, I'd rather smell like gas oil than livestock. And I said, you're crazy. I said, you can't get sick from smelling livestock.
You feel so helpless, you know.
The split estate is a concept that dates back to when the English king reserved his rights to gold and silver deposits, despite who owned the land. As America was homesteaded, the government continued the tradition of this kind of separate ownership.
Don't believe for 1 minute that anything is off limits. 150 feet away from your house, 1.5 times the length of the derrick. So if it falls over, it won't hit your house. We see this look on people's faces, and they get that look and they say, well, wait a minute, that can't be right. That's not fair, that can't be. But it is. That's the way it is.
This is an active drilling rig near a small house showing just how close the two can be and how large the pad is. During drilling, a site can cover several acres before it is reduced to a smaller pad for the producing well. Today, with cries for more domestic oil and gas production, energy companies have been aggressively leasing mineral rights so that they can drill beneath both private and public lands all over the Rocky Mountain West.
This industry has been expanding dramatically, tens of thousands of new wells across the region. In Colorado alone, we've had about 30,000 wells, and we expect another 30,000 in the next 5 or 6 years.
For decades, the oil and gas industry has lobbied to create a regulatory climate which has paved the way for the current drilling boom. Back in 2000, after the Bush-Cheney election, there was a dramatic acceleration in drilling activity. Both had received large contributions from oil and gas interests, and the vice president had been the chief executive of Halliburton, a major player in the drilling industry.
Meeting the needs of our growing economy also means expanding our domestic production of oil and natural gas, which are vital fuels for transportation, electricity, and manufacturing.
Whatever our hopes for developing alternative sources and for conserving energy, and that's part of our plan, the reality is that fossil fuels supply virtually 100% of our transportation needs. Hello.
Many Democrats fought the Bush-Cheney energy policies. They felt they were shut out of the process of developing the nation's approach to energy.
This administration is a gas and oil administration, frankly, and so they're wedded to an old policy. They're wedded to a 20th century policy when we need a 21st century policy.
You have the Bush administration. You have 2 oilmen at the very top, and they aren't sympathetic.
They're making very serious mistakes because they've talked to themselves and the energy companies, and only themselves and the energy companies.
We don't know what other provisions may have been added in, special interest provisions that are easy to add in when you're writing one of these bills in secret.
In 2005, the administration's energy bill passed with support from members of both political parties. It provided the gas and oil industry with billions of dollars in subsidies, tax breaks, and research money.
65% of the current subsidies go to gas and oil, and you have this imbalance. We ought to have 65% or more, 80% ought to be going to alternative renewable technology, to energy efficiency.
The energy bill makes practical reforms to the oil and gas permitting process to encourage new exploration. After years of debate and division, Congress passed a good bill.
It all began here for us 25 years ago when my husband moved here. Then I moved here 18 years ago. Orland and I were married in 1988. I was a pharmaceutical chemist for many years. My husband is a civil engineer with a specialty in water, and he is retired. A few years ago, we ran into some real problems with the oil and gas industry because they have begun drilling here. Encana Oil and Gas contacted us in the early spring of 2004 with the proposal that they would put wells on our land. And we began negotiating a surface use agreement with them, and we negotiated for 9 months. And the bulldozers showed up one day and began ripping and tearing before we had signed a surface use agreement.
Regulations require that oil and gas companies consult with landowners before drilling. If the landowner doesn't agree to the terms the company proposes, it can post a bond with the state, go onto the land, and drill anyway. That's what happened to the Bells.
When we purchased, I asked the seller about the mineral rights, and he said he didn't have them to sell.
85% of landowners in Colorado do not own the rights to the minerals under their land.
Until you get on the federal property, I think it is private interests that own the mineral rights all through here. Once you get on the forest or BLM, then of course it's the government.
Garfield County, located high in the Colorado Rockies, was always a quiet rural area for its residents. But in the 1990s, things started to change. Gas and oil drilling began to boom, and development has expanded dramatically each year.
When I first came to Colorado 27 years ago, the energy production was for oil, and at the time that there was the Synthetic Fuels Corporation, and it was all about oil shale. Natural gas, they didn't have pipelines for it, and so they were trying to figure out what to do with all the natural gas. They knew there was a lot, but there was no use for it at the time. Now, natural gas is the biggest thing that's going on in western Colorado.
This is all Encana leases in here. Across the road is Bill Barrett Corporation. And over there, they're on 10-acre spacing. From here, if you knew what you were looking for and you knew how many wells were on pads, I'd bet you could see 300-400 wells. You're standing right over a pipeline right here, by the way. Right where we're standing, we had a spill. You can just see over my head here, we've got the neighbors' wells. I don't know, 3, 4 of them over there. And that stack closest to us blew one day. It looked like Old Faithful had trot off over there.
The separator spewed paraffin out all over the pad and on over into a good number of acres of our pasture. And that paraffin was laced with Etates chemicals, hydrocarbons of various kinds.
We were concerned that it would contaminate in the ditch. And the grasses were heavy and dry and whatnot, so we just burned the ditch and the hydrocarbons along with it so we wouldn't get it in our ditch water.
ConocoPhillips operates about 10,000 wells here in the basin, which is an incredible number of wells to try and manage on a daily basis. And so as a simple example, when we do well reviews and look at what our wells should be delivering, if we spend 5 minutes per well, it takes about 9 months to go through that process.
Everything below us down here is our Menta Canyon. If you get up on the big Harris Mesa benches, those benches are just littered with wells, approximately 500 all total. And now with the new well spacings that they approved, we'll go from about 500 to about 1,500 within the next 20 years.
We drill, it averages about 350 new wells per year. When you take the Colorado side, and include that, we think that ConocoPhillips has probably another 10,000 wells that we will drill in the basin over the next 40 years, say.
The sharply increased drilling on Gilbert Armenta's ranch is typical of what has happened to vast expanses of northern New Mexico land. A satellite image shows the crisscrossing patterns of access roads and wells extending for hundreds of miles across San Juan County and northwest New Mexico.
The land surface has been scarred up so bad that I can't recognize it from the first time I saw it.
The ranch lands of San Juan County aren't the only areas inundated by drilling rigs. In the towns near Gilbert Armenta's land, there are wells everywhere, in neighborhoods and near schools.
Gas industry has been here for 50-plus years, and we do drill in populated areas. You can go out here a couple hundred yards from this office and find a producing well. ConocoPhillips is the largest producer in the San Juan Basin. When you look at the total between our workforce directly and then indirectly, people working for us, it's about 8% of the local population. So we're a very large employer in the basin here.
Industry has brought jobs and money to the county, but for Gilbert Armenta, the price has been much too high.
This gate will be the gate to enter into my property. The old company had me completely locked out. For 2.5 years, the only way they would give me a key to enter my own property is if I agreed to keep the gate locked at all times. The industry has the mentality that it's all theirs and don't belong to nobody else. And that's what they tell us when they come out to drill here on our lands. It's ours. You're in our way.
We just think the Good Neighbor program is something that was somewhat elementary. And it's just respect, because if you don't, two things will happen. First is the government will regulate you, and a lot of times regulate you out of business. And second is New Mexico becomes an unfriendly business environment, and oil and gas industries go elsewhere. I don't think the state wants that. The oil and gas industry doesn't want that. We have a very large emphasis with our 325 member companies about being a good neighbor, about talking to people, about doing the things that you would do in your neighborhood with your next door neighbor.
In the U.S. and the lower 48 onshore, the boom that is currently going on is driven a lot by technology. There have been a lot of technological advances with horizontal drilling, with fracture stimulation.
One of the key elements to finding and getting the resource out of very tight sand or hard rock is a fracking process. Fracking is just a short word for fracturing.
Hydraulic fracturing, or fracking as it's commonly called, is a drilling technique first commercialized by Halliburton in 1949.
It comes in with very high-powered water and sand and a slightly soapy mixture. And all it does is it goes down and it just fractures little tiny fractures in the rock. And then the sand goes into those fractures and allows the gas to escape. And then the gas flows in to the pipe and up to the surface and to people's homes.
Hydraulic fracturing is largely responsible for the domestic drilling boom. Because of its high cost, it was not widely used until recently, in the 1990s, when the price of natural gas shot up high enough to make it affordable.
Here are the reserve pits here.
Dr. Theo Colborn is one of the world's leading authorities on endocrine-disrupting chemicals in the environment and their impact on humans.
Down in here, the trucks are coming all the way from Delta, which is 30 miles to here, but we're looking.
She has been studying the chemicals used by the industry for drilling and extraction and documenting their effects.
Basically, our first list of the chemicals that were being used was this very, very short and uninteresting list that EPA put together. It certainly wasn't comprehensive, we knew. We found out very rapidly that it was no small list. They don't tell you everything that's in a product. You may only get 5% of what's in that product. and the rest of it is proprietary, or they just don't give it. They don't have to.
Oil and gas deposits below ground contain toxic compounds that are brought to the surface during drilling. These compounds pollute the environment and can cause health problems. But the impacts of drilling are made even worse by the chemical products that are injected during the process. Dr. Colborn has documented over 200 products used in Colorado drilling. Over 90% contain chemicals with adverse health effects.
There is not any proof that there's been anything harmful in the fracking fluids that are used to fracture the wells.
You know, our fluids are not toxic. I know we get I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what is actually in these fluids.
I have fracking fluid taken right out of a fracking truck in my office. I've had it in my mouth, I've tasted it, and I'm just fine.
For people who are telling you that these products are safe, first, ask them what they have been trained in. 2, find out who's paying their salary. And 3rd, actually hand them a real glassful of something that you have taken from an evaporation pond and ask them to drink it.
I think it's just so important people understand that we live here and love it also. So why would we mess in our nest?
Dee and Harold Hoffmeister live across the road from the Bell Farm, surrounded by an ever-increasing number of natural gas wells.
We were in bed actually sleeping, and we heard this pop, and then our son called. He said that the well was on fire, and my husband went to try to go outside, and it was too hot on the deck, so he couldn't. It was blowing right that way.
Our house.
And then the fire trucks came, but they waited way down because there was nothing they could do.
Had to wait for most of it to burn up.
Yeah.
And foam the rest of it.
Yeah. So I think they were there basically for our homes, you know, if they caught fire or something, you know, one of our structures.
Industrial accidents and spills are common in these communities. Between 2003 and 2008, it is estimated that there were 1,435 spills in Colorado. Nearly a quarter of these spills are believed to have contaminated either ground or surface water in the state.
Every time we hear this, it's fine, it's fine. Wait and see. Let's wait and see. Watch yourself. And then some horrible thing happens, you know?
A little farther down Dry Hollow Road is the Divide Creek.
Okay, here we go.
That's where Lisa Bracken and her family live.
This is back where it was first discovered. We got a call one day, April 1st, from a neighbor, Steve Thompson, and said, you know, I found some stuff down here on my place that doesn't look right. I think you should come look at it. And he said, it's not normal.
See all them bubbles in that water up there, Bob? Yeah. Looks like little fish jumping.
Jesus, yeah.
That's all gas coming up there.
On both his and our properties, there was the evidence of bubbling in the creek. We didn't know what it was. It looked like a Pepsi can. There was just an eruption of bubbles fizzing all over the place, in the reeds and in the water.
In an effort to convince authorities that the bubbling was not occurring naturally, Lisa and her family demonstrated that the gas would ignite.
Yeah, let's go ahead and light it.
Oh, yeah, it burns.
Yeah, I'd say.
Keep your face out.
Yeah, I am.
Water samples taken from the groundwater in the Divide Creek seep area showed levels of the carcinogen benzene 48 times government standards. Gas was released into the creek for 55 days before the well believed to have caused the seep was resealed.
After they remediated the well, evidence of the seep largely disappeared. Here, it went away. And Pepe's place on Langingers, it diminished significantly. And there's still some evidence of it there, but it's the only lingering presence.
To this day, gas continues to bubble up at the seep's main exit point on Pepe Langinger's land.
So what they're trying to do is contain everything, the contamination, right in a certain area here.
There's still benzene, toluene in there, and nobody knows how long it's going to take, or if ever, really, everything is going to be cleared up.
According to a statement provided by the Encana Corporation, nothing that Encana did was out of compliance with the regulations in place at that time. Extensive monitoring following the incident indicates there was no contamination of residential water sources as a result of the seep. An air convection system is in place to remove benzene from the groundwater in the plume area. Spills and groundwater contamination can occur anywhere there is drilling. Industry representatives often try to downplay their environmental impact.
This is Colorado Matters. Some Coloradans who live near oil and gas wells say drilling is making them sick.
The recent spike in oil and gas drilling in Colorado is having a big impact.
But there's little information about the effect of all that drilling on human health.
Residents in Garfield County began to complain that they were getting sick as a result of the drilling activities in their neighborhoods. A young woman from Silt, Laura Amos, was one of the earliest and loudest voices.
As everyone in this room probably knows, my groundwater has been contaminated with methane, Williamsport gas. There are a lot of people in this room with contamination and pollution issues. So who then is responsible to me for that loss of my welfare if it's not you, the Gas Commission?
If a well is drilled next to your residence or near your residence within the legal setbacks, and there's a perceived or real impact on your property value, we don't address that.
In 2001, gas wells were drilled using the fracking technique a mere 500 feet from the Amos home. Underground, the drilling breached their water well, causing their drinking water to fill with gray sediment and fizz like soda pop. The Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission tested the water well and found methane, but said it was safe. But they warned the Amoses to keep a window open so the methane gas wouldn't build up and cause an explosion in their home. The Amoses stopped drinking the water, but continued to bathe in it. She later found out that a chemical that had been used in the 2001 fracking has been linked to adrenal gland tumors. When she went to Encana, they denied using it on that well or any other. Months later, the Oil and Gas Commission admitted that it had been used after all. After years of mounting medical bills, devalued property, and diminishing options, Laura agreed to a monetary settlement with Encana Corporation, the company responsible for her problems. The settlement stipulated she stop telling her story publicly, which is why she was not interviewed for this film. Many family stories like hers will never be told because of company settlements that require silence.
Let's go over on the trampoline.
In spite of the well explosion and fire, Dee Hoffmeister has stayed in her house surrounded by her children and grandchildren.
This kind of helps me, gives me a little more steadiness until I can grab something. You know, they were doing okay as long as the rigs and that weren't there, and it was just the working well. And you still got whiffs of smells and that, and I just couldn't be outside. It wasn't in the house. But then they brought in the temporary rig because they were having problems with one of the holes, I think. And then the smells all started up again because they were doing the fracking, and it all blows right over here. We had one back there behind us. We had two on the side here that were all working, you know, flaring with gas. And I got much more ill after the fire. Whatever was there just burned and came right at me. You know, it was like somebody had just dumped chemicals on me. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore, and Monday my husband took me to the emergency room at the hospital. Can you get down? I have 21 grandkids and one great. Oh! Yeah, they've been pretty sick. They've had colds, asthma,
girls have all had lung infections.
Lung infections.
Liam's asthma is really bad. He's on 4 different medicines.
Basically, we found that if you were to take all of the chemicals that are used in a particular state, always where you see the highest percentage of possible health effects, it's always skin irritation, eye irritation, blistering, sinuses, asthma, coughing, and then this effect called sensitizing, itchy skin, burny skin.
Dee still lives on Dry Hollow Road. Shortly after this interview, Dee's son and daughter-in-law and their 4 children moved out of the state. And when they moved, their respiratory problems disappeared. In 2004, the Bush-Cheney administration's Environmental Protection Agency asserted that fracturing does not threaten drinking water. This was challenged by a 30-year EPA environmental engineer, Weston Wilson, acting under protected whistleblower status.
The former chairman, CEO of Halliburton, Dick Cheney, within a few months of coming into office, and as vice president, he was pressuring the administrator of EPA, Christy Todd Whitman, to exempt hydraulic fracking from the Safe Drinking Water Act regulation. From my own point of view as a technician, I just thought it very alarming that EPA technically had described how toxic these materials are, toxic at the point of injection, and still come out with a summary that says they don't need to be reported or regulated. And that led me in the fall of '04 to object on technical grounds. Then the Inspector General of EPA began an investigation of my complaints. And several months into that, Congress took the report from EPA saying that fracking did not present a risk, along with other information, and exempted hydraulic fracking from regulation under the Safe Drinking Water Act. That leaves you and I, as the American public, in this position. We cannot know what the industry injects in our land. It is exempt from being reported.
Down the Colorado River, about 9 miles to the west of Silt, is the town of Rifle.
This is when we lived in Glenwood. This is before any problems, before we lived in Rifle. This is 1993. Well, we've been married like 100 years.
It's been almost 15 years now.
I'm 54, and she's 59. She's changed. She's changed so much. Here's the traditional Chris picture. Here's the traditional Steve picture.
In 1993, Chris and Steve Mabaldi decided to leave California to move to Colorado.
We both got laid off from our work because we both volunteered to be laid off because we wanted to get out of California and move to Colorado, where it was beautiful and clean air and clean water.
They found themselves in Garfield County looking for a new home.
There's Chris.
Hi.
In 1995, they bought their dream house, a fixer-upper in a rural neighborhood outside Rifle.
We're very in love with the place, and we plan to just stay there forever.
It was shortly after Chris and Steve moved in that drilling rigs began to appear on some of their neighbors' land and in the surrounding hills.
And then everything changed. Chris would get in the shower, and her skin turned bright red. I think it was 96. Her skin, it was burning on fire. She would swell.
Steve began to develop symptoms as well.
I'd feel dizzy. I'd get bloody noses.
Chris's health began to deteriorate rapidly. She began losing her sight, had severe headaches, and had pain in her hands and feet. There were 2 surgeries to remove a pituitary tumor, and she developed a rare neurological speech impairment.
But I got to sing or say, fight hurting.
I've had several patients who have been having symptoms since the time that they were exposed to oil and gas exploration near their homes. These are all people in a small cluster around Rifle.
Last year, EPA got several citizens' requests from Garfield County, and the citizens were saying, gosh, my drinking water might be contaminated by this practice, or the air we breathe might be affected. EPA, can you look into it? EPA should have. Myself and another staff person, we had prepared the letters, and we were ready to write to the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission that we felt that this practice caused imminent substantial risk to public drinking water source, and that EPA was going to take over the investigation. However, as soon as we got that to our political appointee supervisors, they canceled that investigation. So EPA did not investigate the legitimate complaints from citizens in Garfield County.
If you lived in a rural residential area and you were in a low-lying area, your house was in a low-lying area that could accumulate these gases when they come off the tank, battery, and so forth, you may be breathing those for 12 hours a day.
One of the concerns of the agency with respect to the oil and gas industry is how much volatile organic carbon, how much volatile gases come from the industry, especially from storage of oil or storage of gas. Last summer, in an effort to track down how much volatile organic carbon was coming from the oil and gas industry, a unique study was undertaken by EPA. And EPA brought in some infrared cameras and turned them towards these oil and gas facilities. And under infrared light, the volatile organic emissions were visible. They looked like a mirage. And so one could see in this infrared camera the amount of volatile organic carbon coming off these storage tanks.
Every well is drilled into a stratum that has organic chemicals in it. Oil is a mixture of these very heavy organics, but it's a range from these kind of greasy, very heavy, oily stuff to stuff which is quite volatile. Those materials evaporate very quickly. All of those are potentially toxic, but we don't know to what extent. Many of them are dangerous. Ethylene, for instance, is converted in humans to ethylene oxide, and ethylene oxide is a carcinogen.
Besides the drilling in their immediate neighborhood, Chris and Steve were directly downwind of what was becoming a major drilling field, exposing them to even higher levels of airborne toxins. Another source of possible exposure was a wastewater treatment facility located across the river from their home. In 1997, as Chris's symptoms were getting worse, a water well near the Mabaldis was blown out and contaminated by drilling. According to state records, on September 15, 1997, Barrett Resources lost well control while drilling the Burnclaw gas well.
Then the gas companies came out and told everybody not to drink the water, and they actually started delivering water to us. Then they came back and told us that your water's safe to drink. So we started drinking the water again.
When the exposure is through a water pathway, people are usually given an alternate drinking water supply. You don't think of it, but there are a lot of sources of water vapor in the house. Your dishwasher, every time you flush the toilet, and you breathe it in, and you absorb it through your skin, your dose of the volatile organic compound from the shower water will be several times the dose you would have gotten from the drinking water.
After we started thinking, something's not right, put a glass of water out and left it sit overnight, and there was like a little oil slick on top.
In desperation, Chris and Steve moved to Grand Junction, Colorado, abandoning their home and a place that had been their dream.
We just up and left, the place. And it was valued at $440,000, and we just walked away from it.
There are no official statistics tracking people who have moved away because of the effects of gas and oil development. But in the 2 Colorado communities profiled in this film, the impact has been profound. There is a record of at least 9 Dry Hollow families who formally complained about the drilling, and they have moved away. Some were afraid, some were sick, all were exhausted by their fight with the industry. Chris and Steve have seen the same thing in their neighborhood in Rifle.
I think almost all of our neighbors have moved away, and all the people that occupy the houses now are all people that work for the wells.
No gas, no oil. We're not about to compensate people for full value loss of their property. And anybody in this room that thinks...
There's a growing resistance on the part of people who live in the path of drilling.
They're lying to us.
I object to any company that will come in, drive people out of the homes that we built with our own hands, and homes that we have every right to expect to live on our own.
I have to say that living with this development has affected our lives in nearly every way imaginable.
With no other recourse, some landowners have become activists.
I think there's no question that people are getting sick from the environmental effects of oil and gas exploration and production throughout the United States. And what's striking is when you ask them what their symptoms are, it's the same in one area as it is in another area.
Oil and gas states like New Mexico and Colorado are caught between intense pressure from the federal government to lease more land for drilling and the desire to protect the land and their citizens. In June of 2007, newly elected Colorado Governor Bill Ritter was faced with a critical confrontation with the Bureau of Land Management, an agency of the Interior Department. They had authorized more than 1,500 new gas wells on the Roan Plateau, one of the last pristine areas in Garfield County.
We just started with a very modest request, 120 days for a new administration, and we were turned down. And we don't think 24 days is enough for us to be able to really have a thoughtful and prudent response. There's too much that we don't know for us to be able to really respond in a very short amount of time.
So that's why I'm going to push very hard with Secretary Kempthorne, and I'm going to ask him to grant the governor the request that the governor has made of him.
In the summer of 2008, in spite of protests from Governor Ritter and Colorado legislators, the Bureau of Land Management went ahead with a federal auction of leases on the Roan Plateau. The entire top of the plateau, 55,000 acres, was leased. Nearly 15,000 citizens sent protest letters, but the Bureau found the protests to be without merit and issued the leases anyway.
Our goal is zero incidents and zero impact on the environment, and we're not there, obviously. We do have injuries, we do have spills, but we try and prevent them, and we do the best that we can.
It's not any more dangerous than walking across the road anywhere. I mean, it's not any more dangerous. This is natural gas. We're not talking oil or oil spills. It's natural gas. No, it's not any more dangerous.
Today's hearing will examine loopholes in federal health and environmental protections that are exploited by the oil and gas industry. As children, we all learned about basic fairness, and we know that it's not fair when someone gets to play by different rules than the rest of us. But as we will learn today, there is one set of environmental rules for the oil and gas industry and a different set of rules for the rest of America.
The federal government's got to be involved in that this isn't something that the states can do.
Definitely, because this chemical testing is expensive. States don't have the money.
Would you think it would be hard to find these chemicals if you waited for years to sample them?
Definitely, yes.
Why does it, do you know why it takes so long to do the testing?
Because this isn't what you traditionally test for.
Are we not doing enough basic research into this area?
We are not. They're slipping through our safety net, truly.
There have been many attempts to create more balance between the interests of industry and those of surface owners. Due in part to the activism of landowners in Colorado and New Mexico, new legislation was passed in both states giving landowners some new rights. But for industry, it is still essentially business as usual. The pace of new drilling continues to accelerate unabated. Attempts at regulatory change at the federal level have not been as successful.
The energy bill that was passed by the House of Representatives in 2007 did include additional protections for surface owners when the oil and gas is owned by the federal government. Those provisions, unfortunately, did not make it into law.
In the spring of 2007, Governor Bill Ritter signed one of the new Colorado bills. It changed the makeup of the state commission that regulates the industry. The ceremony was attended by some of the residents of Garfield County.
The poison is in your hand.
At least my hands
Are they in
my
your feet too? Do your feet
Oh,
have a lot of pain and itching?
Lot of
Mine
pain.
are awful.
House Bill 1341 may be one of the most significant things that we accomplished in this legislative session. It reorganized the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. And we believe it brings a better balance to the commission so that it's now not dominated by any one interest group. But we're going to be responsible as we move forward. We're going to be mindful of the impact as the number of drilling applications climb and as the number of impact complaints climb as well.
Half of the state of Colorado or more sits above the gas-bearing zone. And so this is an issue that will be with us for many, many years to come. And the decisions that we make today are going to define how this will all transpire over the next 20 years.
I hope the people of this state, look at the fact that today we have close to 5,000 wells that have been drilled. That's just in the northwestern area. And if you look down the road 15 years and you start contemplating 60,000 wells, 60,000 wells, what does that do?
Williams is going to have to respectfully decline to participate in your project. We struggled with this decision, but we feel like
I need to let you know that we transfer all video and radio media contacts over to the.
I think at this point, no, I'm not interested in. At this particular point, I don't think there is a story.
We do wish you the best in your endeavors, and thank you for your consideration.
As in the Rocky Mountains, the growth of domestic drilling is beginning to impact people and places across America in ways never imagined. Oil companies are seeking new leases in 32 states. Since 1990, hundreds of thousands of new wells have been drilled, and the pace of development is accelerating. Incredibly, drilling is now planned in the New York City watershed, which provides drinking water to millions. But some feel it doesn't have to be this way.
Technology is available for industry to comply with all these laws and to conduct their business in a much cleaner way. It's often affordable and it's often profitable.
We can make them do it better. The profits now in the industry are so high that there's no reason why they can't start using some new technology, develop the new technology to capture the escaping gases, the VOCs, but also to do something with that water.
When they capture these hazardous substances, they can also capture more of their saleable product.
We need data And we need data on animals, we need data on humans, we need data on the population. And that requires, again, money, a plan, you know, and doing it.
Let's work on alternatives. You know, let's serve the country through alternative energy.
We all use energy. We all know we need energy. There are a lot better ways we could do energy, and I'd like to see us move towards a clean energy future.
What's most important is for Congress to close these loopholes and to hold the oil and gas industry to the same standards as other industries.
If the industry waits 15 years down the road, they're going to be answering some very hard questions to a jury and to a number of plaintiffs saying, you know, when it was so inexpensive to put some of these pollution control equipment and practices on your operation, why, when you knew that there were sicknesses, you know, why didn't you do it?